In today's video, I'm going to be continuing with and finishing up the Mages Guild questline featured in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Last time, I received a variety of orders from Skink in Treeshade over in Sadrith Mora. I also received duties from Rhaenys Athris over in Balmora, and some of her suggested methods for completing them were questionable. Regardless, once all of her quests were taken care of, I returned to Edwina Elbert over in Aldrune and continued my work with her. This is where the story continues. Speaking with Elbert, I asked her for more duties. She told me that a few of her colleagues were working over in the Dwemer ruins of Nchuleftingth. Their latest excavation report is apparently long overdue, and Edwina would like me to check in on them to make sure everything is okay. Inquiring about the report, she says that her main contact is a man named Senilius Cadiesis, and the report is for some official Imperial research, which at this point is 1 month late. When asked about Nchuleftingth, she tells me of a few different ways to get there. Exiting the conversation, I left the guild hall and took the Silt Strider to Saran. From Saran, I leapt and levitated my way northeast until I arrived at the Dwarven ruins. On one of the upper landings was a giant dwarven crossbow, which I found to be pretty neat. Unfortunately, no way to use it or fire it, but the concept of it was really interesting. Entering Nchuleftingth, I had my hands ready in case there were any nearby threats. Luckily though, through the first pair of steel and iron doors, I ran into two friendly NPCs, Pania and Senilius Cadiesis. Speaking with Senilius, he introduced himself and his daughter, then asked if I was sent here on behalf of Edwina. He tells me that he unfortunately doesn't have the excavation report ready. Inquiring about it, the Imperial says that they've had a few setbacks, and among them is the disappearance of their guide, Anis Vendu. Questioning the disappearance, Cadiesis mentions that Vendu was taking notes for the report and ventured off into the lower areas of the ruin. He finishes by asking if I could try and find it. Exiting the conversation, I wandered a bit before arriving outside of the Test of Pattern. Going inside, it appeared to be one medium-sized room, filled with machines and cranks. At first, this seemed to be a dead end, and then I walked up to some of the aforementioned cranks and began turning them. The first one I activated spun no problem. The other two, though, were trapped and inflicted me with some kind of poison damage. As it turns out, one of the cranks, likely the one that didn't poison me, opened up a secret section of the room, which then led me to the lower levels. Here, there were multiple ways to go and different platforms to explore. There were also various enemies to take on, like Dwarven Spears, Steam Centurions, and Dwarven Spectres. Soon, I stumbled across the dead body of Anis Vendu, and in his inventory was Senilius' report. Interestingly, next to his body was a book called Hanging Gardens. Picking it up, it details how the text is written in Dwemer but translated to Aldmeris, with only a few readable parts. It seemed interesting enough, so I took it with me. Next, I wanted to take a peek at the excavation report on Nchuleftingth. It read, "Our excavations have turned up little in these last few days. I have found nothing new in the ruins. Everything seems as clean and undisturbed as the day we first opened the outer doors. I know there are unexplored depths. I can feel massive Dwemer machinery still running beneath my feet, even as I write this, but I can find no way to get to it. You must not give up on us for a lack of results this soon, Edwina. I am sure a great discovery lies somewhere below. If only the secret of Passwall were not lost nearly a generation ago. With a few of those precious scrolls, I would be in the lower levels already, where the real discoveries are to be made. There is some good news. I have also discovered that Mzuleft you were looking for. Apparently, Mzuleft is the proper name for the large Dwemer ruins south of Dagon Fell. Be careful not to confuse them with the ruins of Kardark nearby. The last of the Dwemer Centurion spiders in the upper levels was finally disabled and dismantled for study. I wish we could study them while they're still active, but that is far too dangerous. I also heard a strange story about the Centurion spider that we captured and sent back to Cyrodiil. The ship captain I hired wrote to me with an odd story. He said that the spider nearly broke through its cage several times while near Vardenfell, but once he left the Sea of Ghosts, the Centurion suddenly stopped working. What happened next shows that he had more wits than I gave him credit for. He ordered the ship turned about, and as they approached Vardenfell again, the Centurion began moving just as suddenly. This is a curious phenomenon and certainly deserves more investigation. Your servant, Senilius Cadiusis. Returning to the upper levels, I approached the Imperial and informed him of Vendu's demise. He had some suspicion that the Dunmer had perished and was distraught by the news, saying that he should never have gone to the lower levels alone. Without skipping a beat though, he then asked if I found the report. Telling Senilius yes, he asked if I could deliver it to Edwina so that way they can continue their work here. With the lower levels now accessible, they think they can uncover more Dwemer secrets. Exiting the conversation and teleporting back to Aldrun, I spoke with Edwina and handed her the excavation report. She thanked me for my efforts, and with that, thus ends the quest, Nchuleftingth Expedition. Speaking with Elbert and asking her for more work, she said that she wanted me to locate some Dwemer blueprints or plans. Inquiring further, she tells me that Senilius had already sent a blueprint to the Emperor, so she's in need of another. Luckily for her though, his report mentioned the ruin of Mzuleft near the town of Dagon Fell, and she believes that within it, there may be some plans to uncover. Exiting the conversation, I traveled to Vivec and began taking a series of ships over to Dagon Fell. From there, I walked a brief distance southwest and soon arrived at Mzuleft. Entering the ruins and exploring a bit, I ended up encountering a group of orc bandits. They were stationed all around and were a variety of different classes. Interestingly, there were no dwarven centurions or machines here. In total, there were 7 orcs that needed to be cleared. In the room containing Lagak Grolorga, I came across a book called The Egg of Time. Picking it up and taking a peek at it, it wasn't really legible, at least for me. There were pictures in it though, and I recognized its drawings of Sunder, Keening, and the Heart of Lorkhan, all elements that were introduced in the main questline. Taking it, I continued my search and soon came upon a scrap of parchment called Dwemer Scarab plans. It wasn't something that I could read or look further into. Searching around a bit more, I couldn't find anything else, so I figured either the Egg of Time or the Scarab plans were my quest items. Recalling back to Aldrun, Edwina asked if I had any blueprints, and I handed her the plans, which ended up being those for the Dwemer Scarab. She called it excellent work, and with that, thus ends the quest, Scarab Plans in Mzuleft. Speaking again with Elbert, I asked her for more duties, and she informed me that some miners in the Nissus egg mine had apparently broke through into the ruins of Bethamez. Inquiring about them, she tells me that the town covered up the discovery by closing off the mines and claimed the reason was due to blight. Elbert claims to have heard that they found Dwemer plans similar to those that were in Nchuleftingth and Mzuleft. She'd like me to go and take a look for myself, and if possible, grab the blueprints. Exiting the conversation, I took the Silt Strider to Nissus, and from there, located the entrance to the egg mine. It was indeed secured by a level 45 lock, and there was a guard of some kind watching over it. Deciding to just go for it, I unlocked it right in front of him and went on through, which fortunately he didn't care about. Once inside, I began to wander through the mines in search of any plans or possible pathways to the ruins. I soon found myself in the lower egg mine and face to face with an orc named Lugrub Gro Ugdum. Taking a step towards him, he stopped me and began shouting. He said that I wasn't supposed to be here and that I would be in big trouble if I didn't leave after 10 seconds. Scrambling to find another zone, I quickly came across the underground stream. Here, there was a seemingly friendly ghost named Mansilamat Vabdas. I wasn't sure if this was part of another quest or not, so I left it alone and meandered through the passageways. Finding a doorway leading back into the lower egg mine, I faced off against a few Quama warriors, and quickly came across the entrance to Bethamez. It started off as an excavation site, and through a hole in the crust, it turned into the Dwemer ruin. Right away, I came across a book called Divine Metaphysics, and taking a peek at it, it also had illegible writing. But there was a picture that I recognized. It seemed to be a drawing of a Kulakon, or at least something akin to it. Taking the book, laying atop of it on a table were the plans for a Dwemer airship. Snagging it, I took a brief look around Bethamez, but there wasn't much more to explore. Items of interest in hand, I recalled back to Aldrun and presented Edwina with the blueprints. She called them remarkable and said that there's a chance she could uncover their secrets. Edwina finished by saying that she could only wish that Trebonius shared the same amount of dedication to scholarship like I did. Thus ends the quest, Bethamez. Speaking with Elbert once more and asking for duties, she told me that that was it for her. She had no further assignments to give and suggested trying my luck in Balmora or Sadrith Mora. Remembering that Ajira had some secrets she wanted to tell me, I teleported over to her and asked about them. The Khajiit said though that I was still too low of a rank for her to share them with me. So, speaking with Ranis, I had her promote me to the rank of Magician and then Warlock. Now, returning to Ajira, she divulged a pretty interesting one. She apparently knows the whereabouts of the Staff of Magnus. Inquiring about it, she said that it's located in Asu, a cave on the slopes of Mount Kand, northwest of Molag Mar. Exiting the conversation, I forgot that there's a silt strider that runs through there, so I ended up taking a few boats to get to the town. Arriving, I began wandering northwest for a good little bit. I soon reached the edge of Mount Kand and located the Mount Kand Cavern, but I was worried I'd gone too far. My nerves were settled though, as I eventually found the cave entrance just off the beaten path. Going inside, I began my descent and immediately came across some Daedra. There were multiple Daedroth, as well as a conjurer named Fistel, whom kept spawning in a Clanfear. Taking them out and continuing the trek, I was soon brought to a flooded room that contained a small ledge, only reachable by levitation or leaping. Atop it was a Frost Atronach, as well as another sorceress. Through their combined efforts and deflection magic, they were the cause of my first death for this journey. Trying again, this time with a little more strategy, I took out the Atronach, and soon thereafter, the sorceress known as Telvanni Hlaurin. On her body, she had a variety of enchanted items, but of course, the most interesting one was the Staff of Magnus, a two-handed blunt weapon that when cast, has the abilities of spell absorption for 25 to 50 points for 60 seconds, as well as restore health for 1 point for another 60 seconds, both on self. Before leaving, I looted Telvanni's den of its potions, scrolls, and treasures. Casting Recall, I spoke with Ajira and told her that I had secured the Staff of Magnus. She said she knew of my acquisition and wished to tell me another secret. With that, thus ends the quest, the Staff of Magnus. Speaking again with Ajira, I asked about the second secret she had. She replied by saying that she knew the whereabouts of the Warlock's ring. Inquiring about it, she mentioned that someone named Vindamia Drethin has it, and according to Ajira, she's only telling me this because she doesn't like Drethin very much. The Dunmer can apparently be found in Ashur-Badon, a cave on the island to the east of Bal Fel. Exiting the conversation, I used the teleportation services to reach Vivek, and then left my way across the islands. After reaching the Daedric ruin, I went a little bit further east and soon arrived at the entrance of Ashur-Badon. Going inside, I pretty much immediately encountered a Frost Atronach. Taking it out and continuing my trek, I ended up in an area where levitation or some kind of leaping spell was needed to get to the other side. At the time, I was low on magicka and couldn't rest for the heal, so I hopped down and defeated the Jamora at the bottom. Nearby was a container labeled Ancient Chest, and inside was an old key, an enchanted ring, some gold, and most importantly, potions of rising force. Using one brought me to the other side, and I ventured forward, defeating more Atronachs. Soon, I was brought to a doorway that led me into Vindamia's lair. Guarding her was a Storm Atronach, and after taking it out, I noticed that Drethin had fallen into the water below and was essentially defenseless. So, I took the time and helped myself to her personal belongings of books, scrolls, and potions. Once ready, I jumped into the water with her and struck her down with Hope's Fire. Just like Ajira had said, there on her person was the Warlock's ring, an enchanted piece of jewelry that has the abilities of Reflect for 10 to 20% for 30 seconds, as well as Fortify Speed for 10 to 20 points for another 30 seconds. Just about done here, I cast Recall and returned to the Balmora Hall. Chatting with Ajira, I informed her of my recent pickup, and she told me to remember that she's my good friend who shares her secrets. With that, thus ends the quest, the Warlock's Ring. Speaking once more with Ajira, I asked her for duties, and she informed me that she had no more secrets to tell. With her line of quests at an end, all that really remained was the rest of Skink's missions, and any belonging to arch-mage Trebonius. So, taking the teleportation services over to Sadrith Mora, I approached the Argonian and asked him for more duties. He said that I needed to be the rank of wizard before he could actually give me any further orders. Asking Skink for an advancement, he mentioned that in order to achieve wizard rank, I would need a wizard staff. Inquiring about it, he gave me two different options for obtaining the weapon. The first was by simply purchasing one for 5,000 septums. The other was to seek out a rogue witch named Anare and take hers. Intrigued by the second, I asked for more information. Skink said that any wizard staff would be able to help me reach wizard rank, and that it isn't a crime to take one from a renegade mage. He tells me that she could be found in the caverns of Sud, which are apparently off the west coast of Sheogorad. Exiting the conversation, I found it pretty funny that I had just acquired the legendary staff of Magnus, literally through the same means as I'm about to go through with the wizard staff, and yet it simply won't do. Regardless, I traveled over to the capital and from there took a series of boats to Dagon Fell. Leaping and levitating across the island, I soon hit the western shores and found the entrance of the cave. Beginning my descent, I came across a hunger as my first enemy, and just past it were some cobblestone ruins. Again, out of magicka, I found a chest submerged in water that had some potions of jump and rising force. Using them to get atop the stone structures, I battled against some skeletons, a golden saint, and a sorceress who I thought was Anare. Upon her defeat though, I saw that she was someone else and continued my search for the outlaw mage. On the other cobblestone structure, there was a pathway that led to a new area. Here, I fought against a lone Dremora and climbed up onto one more stone structure. There was a doorway, and on the other side was the infamous Anare. We fought for a bit, going cast for cast with our spells, and once she decided that she couldn't take anymore, she set off running. I chased after her and delivered the killing blow with Hope's Fire. Looting her body, she had the wizard staff on her, which had the enchantments of Fortify and Armored for 10 points for 120 seconds, as well as Levitate for 1 point for another 120 seconds. Grabbing it, I looted the Altmer's lair, and then cast Recall back to Sadrith Mora. Informing Skink of my newfound wizard staff, he said that I was now ready for advancement in the guild. Thus ends the quest, a wizard staff. Speaking again with Skink, I asked for that much needed advancement, to which he promoted me to the rank of wizard. From there, I then asked for more duties. The Argonian said that the growing population of ash creatures is starting to concern him. He'd like the soul of one to study, and asks me to bring him the essence of an ash ghoul. Inquiring about it, Skink says that any ash ghoul would do, and that the nearest hub for the 6th house is a cave called Yakin. It's northwest of Tel Arin, and in order to ensure my success, Skink hands me 2 scrolls of Figgy's Gem Feeder, as well as 2 Grand Soul Gems. Exiting the conversation, I left the Wolverine Hall and levitated my way through Azura's coast. Landing on the shores of the mainland, I quickly spotted the entrance to Yakin. Going inside, it was exactly as Skink said. The cave was teeming with 6th house servants. Ash slaves, zombies, dreamers, corpus stalkers, etc. It felt kind of nostalgic battling all of these foes, as it had been a while since I got to face Dagothar's minions. Not too long into the adventure, I encountered my first ash ghoul. Using a scroll on it, I struck it down with Hope's Fire and captured its soul. From here, I was pretty much ready to head back, but my curiosity got the better of me and I decided to keep going. I ended up in a shrine area, fought against more servants, and even encountered Dagoth Velos, a 6th house mini-boss of sorts. There were spoils to take, more enemies to face, pretty much what you would expect from a dungeon like this. Recalling back to Sadrith Mora, I approached Skink and handed him the filled soul gem. With that, thus ends the quest, Soul of an Ash Ghoul. Chatting again with Treeshade, I asked for more work, and he gave me an assignment that I've long been hoping for. He said that it's going to be difficult, but he'd like for me to obtain the rare book on vampires, Galur Rithari's papers. Questioning the papers, he reminds me that they're based on the life-altering event of an ordinator from Bal-Ur who became a vampire and then was cured of the affliction. Skink tells me to ask around booksellers and scholars, as one of them is bound to know where to find a copy. Knowing the drill, I first paid a visit to Codus Colonis and asked about the papers. Of course, like the #1 endorser he is, Codus sends me off to Vivek, and I look to my second friend, Jobasha, at his bookstore. This time though, when asked about the papers, the Khajiit tells me that he's only heard of them, and he's never actually seen them with his own eyes. He recommends looking into the library at the Hall of Justice. It's apparently a hidden room that's well guarded, but he's sure that I'd find a copy in there. Taking my leave, I wandered on over to the Temple Canton and found the doors leading to the Hall of Justice. To be frank, I looked for a good long while for the entrance to the library and just could not find it. I was looking for a doorway or something that was either behind a curtain or in a secret office. Thinking I misinterpreted Jobasha, I even turned my gaze to the library in the Hall of Wisdom, and that was an even bigger waste of my efforts. I eventually landed in the justice offices, and, as it would turn out, the trapdoor was right under my nose. Using telekinesis, I unlocked the level 75 hatch from afar so as to not stir up trouble with the Ordinators. Descending to the library without a problem, I continued my search and cased every single bookshelf. There was a collection of a lot of interesting books down here, and I'd definitely like to revisit them all one day. I found it pretty cool that this was likely the restricted section, and all of these texts were banned from the public eye for one reason or another, especially Rithari's papers, as they go against the norms of Morrowind and the teachings of the temple. Soon, I located Galur's report and began to read it. Galur Rithari's papers are a set of handwritten manuscripts bound as folios. What follows is 2 excerpts. Outnumbered and isolated, I yielded to my foe, the creature dressed like a gentleman, and I hoped for an honorable treatment. Instead, I found myself a feast for a blood-drinking monster. Shamed by my corruption and despairing of my own welfare, I passively acquiesced in my gradual integration into the affairs of Clan Aunde. I made no human my prey, only beasts, and kept myself apart from the other clankin. Nonetheless, I abandoned hope and lived like a beast. Drawn by intimations of my former life, I visited my former post at Balur, hoping perhaps to atone in some form for my crimes by preying upon its monsters or perishing under their attacks. It is there that, by chance, I made petition to the Lord of Troubles, Molag Bal, at an altar deep in the caverns beneath the pilgrim shrine. I was surprised and thrilled and terrified when Molag Bal, or some aspect or agent of the Daedra Lord, offered me a chance to cure myself of vampirism in return for a favor. However, with no hope for my soul or spirit unless I might be cursed, I undertook his quest. Rithari sought and obtained a cursed soul gem of mysterious nature from a deep cavern on the northern slopes of Dagoth, delivering it to Molag Bal's shrine in Balur. I placed the gem within the basin before the altar and instantly experienced a blinding of pain and terror that I cannot express in words, except that it seemed afterward that I had been asleep and dreaming that I was being sliced by thousands of tiny knives from my bowels inside out. I awoke before the altar and gazed in the reflection of my own sword blade at my own face, no longer a blood-seeking beast of teeth and empty eyes. This was definitely a really interesting read. I know what it takes to cure vampirism over in Cyrodiil, but I don't know what it takes to cure it in Morrowind, and I wondered if this was the in-game way to do it. Regardless, I recalled back to Sadrith Mora and handed the papers over to Skink. He called it good work and said that they were an interesting account. As a reward, Tree's Shade hands me his amulet. Taking a look at it, it isn't anything special, but can be sold for 1,000 gold. With that, thus ends the quest, Galur Rithari's papers. Now, before returning to Skink, these next few quests and the order they're done in are pretty important. It is possible to get locked out of them if certain ones are completed in certain ways, so I packed up my bags and teleported over to the Vivec Hall. Here, I spoke with the arch-mage of the Morrowind Mages Guild himself, Trebonius Artorius. He opened by asking what he could do for me, and I inquired about faction duties. He thought on it for a bit, saying that there were several things that the guild needed to get done. Then, after some time, he drops a big one on me and asks me to look into the disappearance of the dwarfs, claiming that to be a great task for someone of my rank. Kind of intrigued, I rolled with it and got some further details. This is when Trebonius shows his incompetence and says that all I need to do is explore some ruins and find out what happened to them. He finishes by suggesting that I chat with some people in the guild as they may have some clues. Exiting the conversation, I thought on that last part for a bit, as it may be one of the smarter things he said. During almost all of my time in the guild, Edwina at the Aldrun Hall has been researching the Dwemer, so I figured she'd be a good person to start with. Chatting with her, there's no direct dialogue prompt for the disappearance of the dwarves, but there are 3 separate ones surrounding each unique book that I found in the last few Dwemer ruins. Starting with the Divine Metaphysics, Elbert says that she can't really make sense of it, even after using Hanging Gardens as a translation. Funny enough, she says that the author probably didn't know any magic themselves, and that they were just a crazy person jotting down their thoughts. When asked about the Egg of Time, she's unable to decipher it, and suggests I pay a visit to Hasfat and Tablis in Balmora. Lastly, for Hanging Gardens, she tells me what I already know, that it's written in Dwarven and translated to Aldmeris. She then suggests that I find someone who knows both languages, as it could be a priceless book in the right hands. With her not being much help, I left Aldrun and traveled to Balmora. Hasfet and Tablis is a member of the Fighters Guild who's obsessed with the Dwemer. In fact, he's the main subject of the second quest featured in Morrowind's main story, and it's based around retrieving a Dwemer puzzle box from the ruins of Arkanthan. Chatting with him, I first asked about divine metaphysics. Contrary to what the great scholar Edwina was saying, Hasfat suggested that there might actually be something here. Again, using Hanging Gardens as a codex, he believes that it details the creation of new gods through some kind of sorcery. He doesn't know much about magic though, so he's unsure on the rest of it. He suggests that I seek out someone who's both a scholar and a mage. Moving on to the Egg of Time, he can't really decipher what it's saying, and specifically says for me to reach out to an older member of House Telvanni. Lastly, for Hanging Gardens, he doesn't even really touch upon its contents. He simply suggests that Senilius Cadiosus back in Nchuleftingth could use it as a translation key for the guild's research. Before leaving, I wanted to get his opinion on the disappearance of the dwarves and see what his thoughts were. The best Hasfat can do is tell me what the official explanation is. The dwarves were utterly destroyed by the gods for profane practices and impiety. The specifics are unknown though, and will always be one of Tamriel's greatest mysteries. Thanks to Antabolis, he practically spelt out who I could look to next for information. Devaith Fur of House Telvanni lives a secluded life out in the Azura's coast region. He too was part of the main questline, and I had a feeling it wasn't necessarily him that would give me the answers. In fact, entering the tower, speaking with Fur, and asking about the Egg of Time, he suggested that I go and chat with none other than Yagrum Bagarn. For me, it's always a pleasure whenever I get to see him. It's like an awestruck moment getting to stand in front of the last living dwarf. Descending to the Corpusarium and entering the bowels section, I saw my old friend and we began speaking. The first thing I asked him about was divine metaphysics. Interestingly, it appears that Edwina wasn't fully wrong about it. Bagarn explains that the book is simply a log of Lord Kagranak's theories, and he believes these ideas should be gone, similar to Kagranak himself. When asked about the Egg of Time, Yagrum probably gave me the best answer. It details how the dwarves were divided on their thinking. Those in Kagranak's group believed that the Dwemer race could be improved upon. However, those that were not suggested that such ways of thinking and acting would be too great of a risk. Due to the Dwemer and Khmer War, Kagranak acted prematurely and began his experiments. Afterwards, the dwarves were never seen again, and that's as best as an explanation anyone's going to get right now. If you aren't familiar with what those experiments are, again, they're a big part of the main quest, and it has to do with Sunder, Keening, Wraithguard, and Lorkhan's Heart. Lastly, when asked about Hanging Gardens, Bagarn tells me that it was common for many books to be written in both Dwarven and Aldmeris. As for its contents, he says that it's nothing more than a travel guide, and I shouldn't concern myself with it. The part that I'm curious about in all of this is why did the Dwemer fail in their ascension to godhood, but the Temple and Dagoth-Ur were successful? Was it due to the Dwemer's corrupt nature and their antagonistic beliefs towards the Divines, or was it perhaps because Kagranak was rushed and didn't do the experiments properly? If so, how did Dagoth-Ur manage to figure it out in such a short amount of time? Again, questions that hopefully one day will be answered. Now, there is technically one more person who I could go to for more information. Over in Nissus, there's a Telvanni wizard named Baladas Demnavani, who can be found in Arv-Strelin. When his disposition is raised, and he's asked about divine metaphysics, he'll say that it's based on the Dwemer making a new god, Anumidium. It's in the same fashion as previously mentioned, utilizing Kagranak's tools and the tones of Lorkhan's Heart. The book also apparently has theories on how to bend El-Nofi, or the Earthbones as he calls them. As for the Egg of Time, he pretty much says the same thing Bagarn said, that it's written from the perspective of someone in Kagranak's camp, Thuan Zanch. It refutes the idea that the experiments are dangerous and risky. As for Hanging Gardens, he simply tells me to keep it safe as it's an interesting find. His idea on the disappearance of the dwarves is similar to Yagram's. The Dwemer didn't like seeing themselves as beneath the divines, and through science and their machines, were able to harness immense power from the heart of Lorkhan. Baladas believes though that they were essentially banished and removed from Mundus. Information gathered, I wrapped up my search and returned to Gerbonius in Vivec. Informing him of my discoveries, he asks to see the books and makes it obvious that he isn't sure what he's looking at. He pretends to know what's going on though, and says that next time he'd prefer a report with my quote-unquote simplified findings. However, he trusts that the mystery is solved. With that, thus ends the quest, Mystery of the Dwarves. Speaking with Artorius again, I asked him for more duties, and it was here that he gave me a pretty tall task. He wanted help with the guild's House Telvanni problems. Questioning what he meant, Gerbonius said that it's no secret the guild and the Great House don't get along. He doesn't think his conflict can be resolved, and so requests that the counselors be killed. Master Arian, Mistress Drotha, Master Gothrin, Master Naloth, and Mistress Thorana. Now, this is a game-altering task. Once the counselors are dead, it affects many different questlines, factions, pathways, etc. Rest assured, for my case, I'll be going through their questline with a different playthrough, so nothing will be affected or altered for that run. Interestingly, 2 out of 5 counselors have already been slain. Gothrin was killed during the main questline when I needed to become Hortator, as per the recommendation of Master Arian. According to Arian, Gothrin would have never made up his mind if I was worthy for the title of Hortator. So, in order to speed up the process and help Arian gain political advantage, I slew him. That was a fight I had immense trouble with though, as at the time, I didn't have a frenzy spell, was a lower level, and couldn't handle Gothrin's backup. The other counselor I took care of was Mistress Thorana, the old zany mage that ruled over Tel Brenora. It was for the Morag Tong's questline and was one of the last contracts that I had to fulfill. Even though she puts up a good fight, I was better equipped, a higher level, and able to single her out with frenzy. For this job, the first person I shot for was Master Naloth. I never really got a chance to know him much, but in my brief time talking to him, he was a jerk and I didn't really like him. Casting my aggro spells, I let off one of my most powerful frost attacks before he had the chance to get any hits in. Dying almost immediately, I looted his body, and the next person I set up for was Mistress Drotha in Tel Mora. She initially came off as rude towards my character for simply being a male, but when I found out why, I definitely understood and felt kind of bad for her. Regardless, a job's a job, and I hit her with the same frenzy spell to start the battle. Kudos to her though, as she fought a lot tougher than Naloth. She withstood my frost spell and healed quite a lot of health. In the end though, I struck her down with Hope's Fire and moved on. The last counselor on this list is Master Arian. I've always liked him because he actually helped me with becoming Hortator of House Telvanni. I don't know if he's a decent guy beyond that though, but in any case, it didn't really matter. Starting the battle with Frenzy, it went pretty much the same way as my tussle with Drotha. My frost spell took down most of his health, he healed, and I finished the job with Hope's Fire. Telvanni counselor's dead, I recalled back to Gerbonius and informed him of the news. He said that he feared for his life with them around, but now feels a whole lot safer. As a reward, he hands me the Necromancer's Amulet, which I found to be pretty odd, and Gerbonius' staff. Taking a look, the amulet has the enchantments of Resist Normal Weapons for 25%, Fortify Intelligence for 25 points, Restore Health for 1 point, and Spell Absorption for 25 points. As for his staff, it has the enchantments of Weakness to Fire and Shock for 7 to 15% for 6 seconds, followed by both fire damage and shock damage for 7 to 15 points for 1 second, all within 5 feet of the target. With that, thus ends the quest, Kill the Telvanni Counselors. Returning to Gerbonius and asking for more duties, he brings up House Telvanni again and says that it's a good thing their leaders are no longer around. With no new orders from him, all that's left is to return to Skink in Sadrith Mora. Doing so, and speaking with him, he said that I needed an advancement before anything could happen. Rising to the rank of Master Wizard, the highest possible title before Arch-mage, I tried again for more duties. Interestingly, Skink says that it's been an honor working with me, and that there's one last task left. It's simply to take a letter from Mikado and deliver it to Gerbonius. Skink doesn't mention much more beyond that, so taking a peek at the letter for myself, it reads, "To the esteemed arch-mage Trebonius Artorius, Guildmaster of Vardenfell. Upon receiving this letter, you will step down from your posts and grant the title of arch-mage to Bard. From this day forward, Bard will handle all guild matters in Vardenfell. You may keep the title of arch-mage, but you will retire from active participation in the affairs of the guild. In the Emperor's name, Akado." Surprised and humbled, I teleported back to Vivec and approached Trebonius. He immediately saw the letter in my hand and asked to see it. After reading it himself, he was also pretty shocked. He said that he wasn't sure why Akado lost faith in him, but will obey his orders. Artorius finishes by saying that he'll watch over me and ensure that I don't, quote, betray the high principles of the Mages Guild. With that taken care of, the Mages Guild questline is officially at an end, and there are new 2 archmages overseeing the faction's operations in Morrowind, as seemingly Trebonius wants to stick around and cling to his power. If this isn't a satisfying enough ending for you, as it wasn't for me, there is an alternative one. After speaking with Skink, or even without doing so, Edwina Elbert and Aldrune can be approached and spoken with. After achieving Master Wizard rank, if she's asked for more duties, she'll say how it's a shame that I'm not leading the guild. Following that, she says that maybe if I speak with Trebonius, he'll understand that perhaps he should step down. Just in case, I dropped Akado's letter on the ground and revisited the conversation with Trebonius. Oddly enough, he opened by asking if I was here to challenge him and wondered if I had it in me to become archmage. Inquiring about it, Artorius mentions that he's seen how I lust over his position and yearn for his power. He then proposes that the 2 of us meet in the arena and fight to the death over the title. Accepting his terms, I made my way for the arena canton and entered the upper area of the arena pit. I've always enjoyed this method as it's kind of fun to look down on my opponents as they scramble to attack. Jumping down, I let Trebonius fire off his spells. Dodging all of them, his magicka soon ran out and he was forced to continue the fight with his fists. I tried to match him for a bit, throwing around some punches, but neither of our hits were landing. So I swapped over to the Daedric Dagger of Soul Drinker. My short blade skill was pretty poor too, but at least I was getting some attacks in. After a long while of going back and forth, I whittled his health down and soon delivered the killing strike. Just like that, Trebonius Artorius was defeated, and I was the sole archmage for the Morrowind Mages Guild. To me, it's a more satisfying ending, and no matter which outcome is chosen, my peers still acknowledge me as the rightful leader. With that, thus ends the quest, Archmage. So that officially wraps up the Mages Guild questline featured in the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind. There are 33 playable quests attached to it, which is certainly a good number. To begin my thoughts, I'll do a tiny recap of everything. The guild is based around research, archaeology, history, and arcane studies. Joining the faction, I started out with doing petty tasks and simple fetch quests, which was to be expected. Slowly, as I progressed through the ranks, the missions surrounded more important matters and had higher stakes. I met with all of the guild stewards, including the archmage, and learned of their personalities, quirks, and characteristics. Trebonius, the man in charge, was fairly incompetent in his role, and it's clear he only got the title due to his connections, although not in a positive way. There are underlying and overlying tensions with House Telvanni, and by the end of the questline, they were utterly crippled. Now, let's talk about what I liked and what I didn't like. For starters, one of my complaints for Oblivion's Mages Guild is that it's too focused on a storyline. I didn't get to see how the guild worked and operated without there being some sort of looming threat to take care of. However, in Morrowind, that's exactly what I got, and I was really pleased with it. I got to participate in lowly tasks as well as grand adventures, all in the name of scholarship and research. Personally, I'm really interested in the Dwemer, so I enjoyed all of the quests surrounding their ruins and artifacts. The ending with Archmage Trebonius was pretty fun too, as there was a lot of weight with killing the Telvanni counselors. It's neat to know how an action as heavy as that has consequences for my playthrough. For me, the highlights were Trebonius's and Edwina's quests. Skink's were interesting too, especially the one that involved collecting Galur Rithari's papers. Rannis's quests were also fine. Catch a Spy was fun, and kill Necromancer Tashby Ashabel was a real thought-provoker. You get to see a dark side of the Mages Guild with envy and jealousy prevailing over truth and reason. All stewards had their ups and downs in terms of intriguing tasks. Ajira's quests though weren't that captivating for me. However, it does make sense because she offers a lot of low-level fetch quests, intended to introduce the player to the guild. Warlock's ring and the staff of Magnus were nifty, but I would have liked a little more backstory on who these mages were and how they came into the possession of such powerful tools. Overall, the Mages Guild Morrowind questline was a fun time, and I enjoyed myself. I learned a lot about the province, its politics, the guild itself, the Dwemer, and the faction's tensions with House Telvanni. I'm excited to see where the next journey leads me, and until next time, keep on adventuring.